I worked with George Mitchell back in the early days. I worked there in 1974 till 76. And he was a geologist, but he also owned the company. And we used to have breakfast together in the morning, several of us. And he talked about wanting to establish a community, not just a little town with a bunch of houses and businesses, but a community.
The concept was that we let the churches and individual denominations do what they can do the best. And therefore they would cooperate each other to help make a better project for all.
He really envisioned churches and communities and places where people could get together and grow and meet each other. So it was just a real natural area that just was going to foster fellowship and friendship.
Myself and my husband Ken moved here in 1974. We lived in Oak Ridge North, and there was no buildings here. There was only lots of trees, and that's one of the reasons why we moved here. Very few grocery stores, but what I remember the most was that dirt road that went from Oak Ridge North into the woodlands.
This is the size of the first directory that was published by Interfaith and the Village Association. I was involved in helping to organize this. My wife Dodie was involved in actually physically putting it together and typing it. And it included a grand total of 208 homes, 382 adults, grand total of 643 people in the whole woodlands. And that was published as of November 1975.
Well, thanks to Don Gibbard, who got all the Catholics together at Interfaith, we got to know each other. And we would go to the Mass at our turn at Interfaith on Sunday evening. So that's how we got together. It was like maybe once a month we would have Mass at Interfaith, and we got to know the Catholics.
This went on for a year or two, I guess it was, and eventually we got Father to commit to having Mass every weekend up here, and prevailed upon the development company, and they let us use some empty office space that was on the second floor of one of the office buildings. And
our first Mass, and how delighted we were that we had a place to go that was close to Oak Ridge. And it was in a building here in the woodlands, a building that was a lot of glass. And what they used was a tree that they stumped that they had sawed off, and that's what we sat on.
The community as a whole, the parish got together and built an altar out of tree stumps. And there were a lot of tree stumps out there at that time with the house clearing going on. Tree stumps and a door and a nice tablecloth on top was the altar. One of the ladies, Nancy Forsley, donated a crucifix that had been on her father's casket. And we made benches out of just long planks and more short, fairly stout tree stumps. And so that did satisfy us as far as Sunday was concerned for the while anyway. Don Gibbard conscripted us to help with the Catholic movement, trying to get this 20% of the population represented by their diocese. And there was a lot of hesitation, there seemed to be, on the part of the diocese as to trying to get really plugged in out here. We wrote letters, we visited with the Chancellor, at that time Fiorenza, and, who became the bishop later and is now Bishop Emeritus. Visited his office several times, and there was always a complaint that there's nobody out there. They've driven us around and there's nothing but trees. There's no houses out there yet. This is all just a big sales ploy. Of course, the early statistics started showing that Catholics were the highest population denomination here, 20 to 21% back in the early days. Note the 1984 edition of the same directory. Well, eventually, like I said, on August the 8th, they signed the decree announcing the parish and the pastor, and the parish was going to be formally established September the 1st.
I remember talking to Father Domek and asking him, how did our church get the name St. Simon and Jude? He said, well, I wanted the parish to be named St. Jude. But Bishop Fiorenza wanted to call it St. Simon. So he said we compromised, because they were old buddies from college and the seminary. So they called it St. Simon and Jude.